The mansion had been silent for 47 days. Lucian Thorne counted every single one of them. Time moved differently when you'd been alive for over 4 centuries. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into hours, and months into the endless grey fog of immortal existence. But lately, he'd been counting again. Counting the way he did, when he was still human, when each day mattered, when each sunset brought him closer to something. Closer to what he no longer remembered. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9. Its brass pendulum swung with mechanical precision, measuring out seconds that meant nothing to him anymore. Lucian sat in his study, surrounded by towers of books he'd read 1,000 times, in a chair that had molded itself to his form over the decades. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the dusty Persian rug. He didn't need the fire. His body hadn't felt cold since 1623, the year he died and was reborn into this cursed existence. But he kept the fire burning anyway, because it reminded him of something he'd lost: warmth, humanity, life. Outside, November rain lashed against the tall windows, and the wind howled through the ancient oaks surrounding his estate. The townspeople of Ashwood Hollow called this place Thorne Manor, though they spoke the name in whispers, always followed by the sign of the cross. They told their children stories about the pale man who lived behind the iron gates, stories designed to keep them away, and it worked. For decades it had worked. Until tonight. The knock came at exactly 9:47 p.m. At first, Lucian thought he'd imagined it. In 400 years of existence, he'd learned that loneliness could play tricks on even an immortal mind. Sometimes he heard voices in empty rooms. Sometimes he saw faces in the shadows that weren't there. But then it came again, harder this time, more desperate. Knock, knock. Lucian's head snapped up from his book, a worn copy of Dante's Inferno that he'd been pretending to read. His supernatural hearing, usually a curse that picked up every heartbeat of every creature within a mile radius, focused on the sound. A heartbeat. Small, rapid, terrified. Knock, knock. The urgency in those knocks made something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in so long he'd almost forgotten the sensation. Concern, fear. Not for himself, he was beyond such things, but for whoever was on the other side of that door. Because nobody came to Thorne Manor, ever, especially not at night, especially not in a storm like this. Lucian rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator, his tall frame, 6 feet 4 inches of lean muscle and pale skin, cast a long shadow as he moved through the corridor. His footsteps were silent on the hardwood floors, centuries of practice allowing him to move without sound. The knocking had stopped, but the heartbeat remained. It was growing weaker. His hand hesitated on the doorknob. The heavy oak door, original to the house's construction in 1847, had kept the world out for so long. Opening it meant inviting something in. Change. Chaos. The unknown. He opened it anyway. The girl nearly collapsed into his arms. She was tiny, drenched from the rain, her clothes plastered to her thin frame, her auburn hair stuck to her face in wet tangles, and her green eyes, so bright, so alive, looked up at him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, you have to help. They're beating my mama. She's dying. Please." For the first time in 83 years, Lucian Thorne was stunned into absolute stillness. The girl swayed on her feet, and his hands, pale as marble, cold as death, reached out instinctively to steady her. She was so warm. Her life force radiated against his palms like a tiny sun, and he had to fight every instinct that screamed at him, to pull away, to protect her from what he was. But she didn't pull away. She grabbed his shirt with small, desperate fists. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, mister. I don't know where else to go. Everyone in town. They won't help. They're scared. But my mama told me once. She told me about the man in the big house. She said you weren't like them. Please." Lucian's throat tightened. When was the last time he'd spoken? Days? Weeks? His voice came out rough, unused. Child, she's dying. The girl's voice cracked. They're gonna kill her. I ran so fast, but I don't think I can get back in time alone. Please, please. Behind her, lightning split the sky, illuminating her small form against the darkness. In that moment, Lucian saw something that made his ancient heart clench with pain so sharp it might have killed him if he were still capable of dying. He saw Isabella, not this girl. She looked nothing like his daughter. Isabella had been younger, barely 8, with dark curls and grey eyes, but it was the expression, that same desperate courage, that fierce love for her mother, that willingness to face a monster in the darkness, if it meant saving someone she loved. "What's your name?" he heard himself ask. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Rose Carter. And my mama is Sarah. Please, sir, we don't have much time." Lucian's mind raced. It had been so long since he'd interacted with humans beyond watching them from the shadows. So long since he'd allowed himself to care. After what happened to Isabella and his beloved Catherine, he'd sworn to never again let mortals into his heart. But this child, how far? He asked quietly. Emma's face lit up with fragile hope. The old Miller property, down by Blackwater Creek. It's maybe 3 miles through the woods. But the road is longer and I know it. Lucian did know it. He'd watched that property fall into ruin over the decades. The Millers had abandoned it in the 1960s after their son disappeared in the woods. "Who is hurting your mother?" Emma's lip trembled. "Bad men. They came 3 weeks ago after my daddy died. They say he owed them money, a lot of money. But we don't have it." Mama tried to explain, but they don't listen. "Tonight they came back, and they were so angry. One of them had a bat, and another had..." Her voice broke. I heard bones breaking. I heard my mama screaming, and I ran because she told me to run. But I don't want to leave her there alone. "Hush, child." Lucian's voice was surprisingly gentle. He'd forgotten he could sound that way. "You did right. You came for help." He looked down at her, at this small, brave girl who'd run through the night to find a monster and beg him to become her salvation. Every rational part of his mind screamed at him to close the door, to send her away, to protect himself from the pain that caring would inevitably bring. But rationality had no power against the memory of Isabella's small hand in his, cold and still. All those years ago, the memory of holding Catherine as she took her last breath, her blood on his hands, his fangs, his soul. He'd failed them. He'd been the monster that destroyed his own family. Maybe, just maybe, he could save this one. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice taking on an edge of authority that came from centuries of command. "You're safe now. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me. Do you understand?" Emma nodded frantically. "You're going to help. You're really going to help my mama?" Lucian stepped past her, into the rain. The cold water ran down his face, and he closed his eyes, reaching for the power that lay dormant in his veins. Power he'd suppressed for so long, trying to be less of what he was. Tonight, he would embrace it. "I'm going to help," he said quietly. Then he turned back to look at her, one more time. "Your mama told you about me?" Emma nodded, water dripping from her chin. "She used to work at the diner, before everything happened. Some of the old folks would talk. They said the man at Thorne Manor was a vampire, a demon, a monster." She paused, her green eyes meeting his crimson ones without flinching. "But Mama said that monsters don't always have fangs, and sometimes the things we fear are less dangerous than the things we trust. She said if I ever needed help, and nobody else would give it, I should come here." Something broke inside Lucian's chest. Something that had been frozen for nearly a century, suddenly cracked and bled. "Your mother is a wise woman," he said softly. "I'll bring her back to you. I promise." He didn't make promises. Promises were for people who believed in tomorrow. But looking at Emma's desperate, hopeful face, he made one anyway. Then Lucian Thorne did something he hadn't done in 83 years. He let the monster out, his form blurred, superhuman speed launching him into the darkness. The rain was nothing, the forest was nothing. He moved like a shadow given flesh, leaping over fallen logs, dodging between trees with supernatural precision. His senses expanded, reaching out through the night. 3 miles between this child's hope and her mother's life. He covered the first mile in less than 2 minutes. As he ran, memories flooded back. The night he'd lost everything. The night he'd learned that being a monster didn't just mean drinking blood. It meant watching helplessly as everything you loved turned to ash and dust. Catherine had been sick for weeks. In 1612, people didn't understand tuberculosis. They called it consumption, and they whispered prayers, and they watched loved ones waste away. Lucian had been human then, a physician desperate to save his wife. He'd made a deal with a creature in the darkness. Give me immortality, give me power, and I'll save her. The creature had laughed. Immortality, yes, but salvation, that you cannot have. You'll live forever, watching everything you love die. He'd taken the deal anyway, became what he'd feared, and then learned the cruelest truth. Vampire blood couldn't cure human diseases. It could only transform, and transformation required death first. Catherine died in his arms, her last words a whisper. Don't let this curse take our Jezebella too. Promise me, keep our daughter human, keep her safe. He'd tried. God, he'd tried. But Isabella had seen what he'd become, seen him feed, seen the monster behind her father's eyes. In her terror, she'd run into the winter night, and by the time he found her, some promises couldn't be kept. Lucian pushed the memories away as he cleared the 2nd mile. He could hear them now, voices, rough, cruel, slurred with alcohol and violence. Stupid bitch. Where'd that little rat run off to? Forget the kid. She won't make it far in this weather. We've got business to finish here. Please. That voice was weak, broken. Sarah Carter. Please, just take what we have. Take everything. Just leave us alone. The sound of impact. A cry of pain. Everything. You've got nothing. Your dead husband gambled it all away, and now you're gonna pay his debts one way or another. Lucian burst through the tri-line. The old Miller property was exactly as he remembered. A rotting farmhouse, with boarded windows and a collapsing porch. A single light burned in the front room, casting yellow shadows across the overgrown yard. 3 men stood in that yard, illuminated by that light. One held a baseball bat, still dripping with something dark. Another clutched a bottle of whiskey. The third was dragging a woman by her hair. Sarah Carter. Even in the rain and darkness, Lucian could see the damage they'd done. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. Her arm hung at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled beneath her as she tried to crawl away, tried to protect herself with broken hands. She was dying. Emma had been right. The monster inside Lucian didn't just wake up. It erupted. The first man never saw him coming. Lucian moved like lightning given form, crossing the distance between the tri-line and the yard in less than a heartbeat. His hand closed around the throat of the man with the baseball bat, a burly figure with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, and the stench of cheap beer radiating from his pores. What the? The man's words choked off as Lucian lifted him off the ground with one hand, his feet dangling uselessly in the air. The other 2 men spun around, their alcohol-dulled reflexes struggling to process what they were seeing. A tall, pale figure in dark clothing, holding their companion like he weighed nothing, crimson eyes blazing in the darkness. Jesus Christ, the one with the whiskey bottle screamed, stumbling backward. What the hell are you? Lucian's voice came out low, dangerous, inhuman. I am the thing your ancestors feared, the nightmare that made them hang garlic over their doors and clutch their crosses in the dark. He squeezed slightly, and the man in his grip gasped, his face turning purple. I am the monster you should have never awakened. The third man, the one who'd been dragging Sarah, released her hair and reached for something in his jacket. A gun. Lucian saw the movement before the man's hand even touched the weapon. He threw the first man aside like a rag doll. The body sailed through the air and crashed into the side of an old pickup truck with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. The man slumped to the ground, unconscious, maybe dead. Lucian didn't particularly care which. The gunman pulled his weapon, hands shaking. "Stay back! Stay the hell back, you freak!" Lucian tilted his head, studying the man with cold curiosity. How many times had he seen this scene play out over the centuries? Humans with their weapons, thinking metal and gunpowder could stop something that had already died and come back. "Go ahead," Lucian said quietly, taking a step forward. "Pull the trigger, see what happens." The man fired. 3 shots, center mass. The sound was deafening in the quiet night, echoing off the surrounding trees. Any normal person would have dropped dead. The bullets hit exactly where they were aimed. Lucian's chest, his heart. He didn't even flinch. The bullets penetrated his flesh. Yes, he felt them burrow into his body, foreign metal seeking vital organs that no longer functioned the way human organs did. Pain registered, distant and meaningless. He'd been shot before, stabbed, burned, broken. Nothing held permanence when you were already dead. The holes closed almost as fast as they opened, his supernatural healing knitting flesh and muscle back together. Within seconds there was no evidence he'd been shot at all, except for the 3 holes in his shirt, and the bullets that fell to the muddy ground with soft, plinking sounds. "Impossible," the gunman whispered, his weapon dropping from nerveless fingers. "Impossible, impossible, impossible. Nothing is impossible," Lucian said, and suddenly he was there, directly in front of the man, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Only improbable. He grabbed the man's collar and leaned in close. This close, the man could see everything, the unnatural pallor of Lucian's skin, the way his eyes glowed with inner fire, the sharp canines that had extended without conscious thought. "You beat a defenseless woman," Lucian hissed. "You terrorized a child. You took pleasure in causing pain." His grip tightened. "Do you know what I do to men like you?" The man whimpered, tears streaming down his face, the sharp, ammonia smell of urine filling the air as his bladder gave out. "Please, please, I'm sorry. We needed the money. Her husband owed us." "Everyone needs something," Lucian said coldly. "It doesn't give you the right to take it in blood." He could kill him. It would be easy. So easy. After decades of surviving on animal blood, of denying his nature, the scent of human fear and human blood was intoxicating. The monster inside him screamed to feed, to rip, to tear, to remind the world why vampires were the apex predators of the night. But then he heard it, a small, broken sound. "Please, Emma, is she safe?" Sarah Carter, still conscious despite everything, still fighting, still worrying about her daughter even as her own life bled out into the mud. Lucian's grip loosened slightly. He looked past the terrified man to where Sarah lay crumpled on the ground. Her eyes, the same green as her daughter's, found his through the rain and darkness. "Please," she whispered again. Don't let them hurt, Emma." Something in Lucian's chest twisted. That same desperate love he'd heard in Emma's voice. A mother's love, transcending pain, transcending fear, transcending everything. The love he'd seen in Catherine's eyes all those centuries ago. The love he'd failed to protect. He released the gunman, who collapsed in a sobbing heap. Lucian turned to the third man, the one with the whiskey bottle, who'd been slowly backing toward a rusty sedan parked near the house. "Don't," Lucian said simply. The man froze. "All of you, listen carefully, because I will say this only once." Lucian's voice carried the weight of 4 centuries of authority, of power, of absolute certainty. "You will leave this place. You will never return. You will never speak of what happened here tonight. If I hear that any of you has come within 10 miles of Sarah Carter or her daughter, I will find you, and when I find you, I will show you horrors that will make tonight seem like a pleasant dream." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You have 30 seconds to get in that car and drive away. After that, I stop being merciful." They didn't need 30 seconds. The man with the whiskey bottle scrambled into the driver's seat. The gunman ran after him, yanking open the passenger door. Together they dragged their unconscious companion into the back seat. The engine roared to life, tires spun in the mud, and then they were gone, taillights disappearing into the rainy darkness. Lucian knew they wouldn't come back. He'd seen that kind of fear before, the kind that burrowed into a man's soul and nested there, whispering warnings every time they closed their eyes. They'd run, probably clear out of the state, and if they were stupid enough to ignore his warning, well, he'd meant what he said. The immediate threat gone, Lucian turned his full attention to Sarah. She was worse than he'd thought, much worse. The rain had washed away some of the blood, but it kept flowing, pooling beneath her from wounds he couldn't immediately see. Both her arms were broken, compound fractures, bone visible through torn skin. Her ribs were crushed, making each breath a wet, rattling struggle. Her face was a mass of bruises and cuts, one eye swollen completely shut, but she was still conscious, still fighting. "Emma," she breathed as Lucian knelt beside her. You found Emma?" "She's safe," Lucian said gently, carefully assessing her injuries. 400 years had taught him much about the human body, how it worked, how it broke, how it died. Sarah Carter was minutes away from death, maybe less. Internal bleeding, certainly, possible punctured lung, shock setting in. He could save her. He knew he could. But the cost. "She came to my home," he continued, his voice soft. "Brave little thing. Ran through the storm to find help." He carefully slid his arms beneath Sarah's broken body. She gasped in pain, and he whispered, "I'm sorry. I have to move you. Your daughter is waiting." Sarah's good eye focused on him, and despite the pain, despite the fear, she smiled. It was a small, broken thing, but genuine. "The vampire," she whispered. "The man from the manor," Emma said. "She'd go there." "You sent her to a monster," Lucian said quietly. "No." Sarah coughed, blood flecking her lips. "I sent her to someone who understands what it means to lose everything." Another wet, painful breath. "I've seen you in town, watching, always watching, like you're looking for something you lost." Lucian stilled. "You've seen me in the shadows, at the diner, when I worked nights, in the cemetery, when I visited Tom's grave." Her voice was growing weaker. "You don't look at people like they're prey. You look at them like you miss being one." The observation struck him harder than the bullets had. This dying woman, this stranger, had seen through centuries of carefully maintained distance and identified the core of his loneliness in a handful of glimpses. "I was human once," he admitted, something he'd never spoken aloud to anyone. "A very long time ago." "Then you remember," Sarah breathed. "You remember what it means to love someone more than your own life." "I do. Please." Her working hand reached up, cold and trembling, to touch his face. "Save my daughter. Promise me. Whatever happens to me, save Emma. She's everything. She's my whole world." Lucian's throat tightened. "I'll save you both. I'm dying." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, accepting. "I can feel it. Everything's cold. But Emma, she has her whole life ahead of her. Promise me you'll protect her. Promise me she'll be safe. Sarah, promise me." The force of her demand triggered a coughing fit. More blood. Darker now. Time was running out. Lucian looked down at this woman, this stranger who'd seen him, truly seen him, and sent her most precious treasure to his door anyway. He thought of Emma waiting at the manor, soaked and terrified, hoping against hope that the monster would become her salvation. He thought of Catherine, making him promise to keep Isabella safe. He'd failed that promise. He'd failed them both. But maybe, just maybe, he could keep this one. "I promise," he said solemnly, "on whatever remains of my soul, I promise you Emma will be safe. I will protect her." Sarah's eye closed, and for a moment Lucian thought she'd slipped away. But then she smiled again, peaceful now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." Then Lucian did something he hadn't done in over a century. He ran for a human's life. He cradled Sarah against his chest and moved through the forest like a dark wind. his supernatural speed turning the world into a blur of rain and shadows. Every second counted. Every heartbeat was precious. Her pulse was growing weaker, more erratic, her breathing shallower. But he was fast, faster than death, faster than fate. The 3 miles back to the manor took less than 90 seconds. He burst through the front door, still unlocked from his hasty departure, and found Emma exactly where he'd left her, curled up in the foyer, her small body shaking with cold and fear. "Mama," she screamed when she saw them. "Don't touch her yet," Lucian commanded, his tone brooking no argument, even as his heart ached at having to keep them apart. "Her bones are broken. I need to set them to stop the bleeding. If you touch her wrong, you could hurt her worse." He carried Sarah to the study, laying her carefully on the leather sofa. Emma followed, tears streaming down her face, her small hands clutched together in desperate prayer. Is she going to die?" Lucian looked at Sarah's broken body, at the blood soaking into his furniture, at the shallow rise and fall of her chest. With human medicine, even modern medicine, she was doomed. The internal injuries alone would kill her within the hour, and the nearest hospital was 40 miles away over mountain roads. But he wasn't human, and neither was his blood. "Emma," he said carefully, kneeling to be at eye level with the girl, "I can save your mother, but the method I must use, it's not natural, it's not normal, and once it's done, things will change. Do you understand?" Emma shook her head, confused and terrified. "I don't understand. I just want my mama to live. Please, please make her live." Lucian closed his eyes. This was the choice, then. The moment that would change everything. He could let Sarah die naturally, mercifully, and keep Emma ignorant of the supernatural world. Or he could save her, and in doing so bind all 3 of them together in ways he couldn't predict. He thought of Catherine, of Isabella, of promises broken and hearts shattered. He thought of Sarah's words, "You remember what it means to love someone more than your own life." He did remember, and maybe it was time to stop running from that memory. "I'll save her," he said quietly. "But Emma, you must be brave for what comes next. Can you do that?" Emma nodded frantically. "I can be brave. I promise." Lucian turned back to Sarah. Her eye had closed, her body still except for the faint, failing rhythm of her heart. Time had run out for half measures. He bit into his own wrist, tearing the pale flesh with his fangs. Dark blood welled up, ancient and potent, carrying 4 centuries of supernatural power. It would heal her, strengthen her, pull her back from death's door. It would also change her, not into a vampire. Transformation required death and rebirth, a whole ritual he had no intention of performing. But his blood would alter her on a fundamental level, enhance her, bind her to him in ways that would last as long as she lived. He pressed his bleeding wrist to Sarah's lips. "Drink," he whispered. "Live." For a moment nothing happened, then Sarah's mouth moved reflexively, swallowing twice. Her body convulsed and Emma cried out in fear, but Lucian held firm. "It's working," he said. "Her body is fighting to survive. The blood is giving her strength." And he could see the changes already, color returning to her gray face, the bleeding beginning to slow, broken bones starting to realign with wet, crunching sounds that made Emma whimper. It was working, but the cost would come later. After several minutes, when Sarah had taken enough blood, Lucian pulled his wrist away. The wound closed instantly, leaving no mark. He sat back, exhausted in a way he hadn't felt in decades. Sharing his blood took power, took essence, took something vital even from an immortal. "Will she wake up?" Emma asked in a tiny voice. "Soon. Her body needs time to heal. The blood will work quickly, but the damage was severe." He looked at Emma, at this brave little girl who'd somehow found her way into his dead heart. "You should rest too. It's been a terrible night." But Emma shook her head stubbornly. She crawled onto the sofa, careful not to jostle her mother, and curled up against Sarah's side. "I'll stay with Mama. I'll wait until she wakes up. Lucian watched them, this small family broken and healing, taking refuge in his home, his sanctuary, the place he'd hidden from the world for so long. And somehow, despite the danger, despite the complications, despite every rational reason to regret his choice, he was glad they were here. For the first time in 83 years, Thorne Manor didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a home. Sarah Carter opened her eyes to a world that was too bright, too sharp, too alive. Every detail assaulted her senses at once, the intricate pattern of cracks in the ceiling plaster, each one telling a story of age and settling, the dust motes dancing in the lamplight, tiny universes spinning in golden orbits. The sound of Emma's heartbeat beside her, strong and steady, a rhythm she'd known since before her daughter was born, but had never heard with such clarity. It was overwhelming, it was terrifying, it was miraculous. "Mama?" Emma's voice close and worried. "Mama, you're awake." Sarah turned her head, and the movement was easy, painless, when it should have been agony. She looked at her daughter, and her breath caught in her throat. Had Emma always been this beautiful? Had her eyes always held such depth, such layered shades of green like sunlight through forest leaves? "Baby," Sarah whispered, and even her own voice sounded different, richer, stronger. "I'm here, I'm okay." Emma burst into tears and threw her arms around Sarah's neck. Sarah held her daughter close, marveling at the warmth of her, the solid reality of her, alive and safe and whole. She could smell Emma's fear fading, being replaced by relief and joy, could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse, the rush of blood through young veins. That last thought made her freeze. "Blood. You're recovering faster than I anticipated." The voice came from across the room. Sarah looked up to find the pale man, the vampire. She had to call him what he was, standing in the doorway. Lucian Thorne. He'd saved her. She remembered that much through the haze of pain and terror. Remembered his cold hands gentle on her broken body, his voice promising protection, his blood. "What did you do to me?" Sarah asked quietly. Lucian stepped into the room, and Sarah noticed things she shouldn't be able to notice. The way he moved with inhuman grace, each step precise and controlled. The way the lamplight didn't quite reflect right in his eyes, as if the crimson glow came from within rather than without. The complete absence of a heartbeat, a silence where sound should be. "I saved your life," he said simply. "You were dying. Multiple internal injuries, broken bones, severe blood loss. You would have been dead within minutes." He paused. "I gave you my blood. It healed you, but it also changed you." "Changed me how?" Sarah's hand instinctively went to Emma, holding her daughter close. Am I like you now?" "No." Lucian shook his head. "Transformation into a vampire requires death and rebirth. A ritual I have no intention of performing, but my blood has altered you on a cellular level, enhanced you. You'll be stronger than a normal human, faster. Your senses will be sharper. You'll heal from injuries that would cripple others, and you'll age much more slowly, perhaps 1 year, for every 10 that pass." Sarah processed this information, her enhanced mind working faster than it ever had before. "But I'm still human, still alive." "Yes, still human, still mortal, though your lifespan will be significantly extended." Lucian's expression was unreadable. "I apologize for making this choice without your consent, but your daughter asked me to save you, and I couldn't say no." Sarah looked down at Emma, who was watching this exchange with wide, frightened eyes. "Emma, sweetheart, did you know? Did you understand what Mr. Thorne was?" Emma nodded slowly. "I knew the stories. Everyone knows the stories about the vampire in the manor. But Mama, you always said, that monsters don't always have fangs." She looked at Lucian. "He saved you. He saved us both. That doesn't make him a monster. That makes him a hero." Lucian flinched at the word as if it physically pained him. "I am no hero, child. You are to us," Sarah said softly. She carefully stood up, expecting pain, expecting weakness. Instead, she felt strong, stronger than she'd felt in years, maybe ever. Her broken arms were whole, her shattered ribs intact. Even the bruises and cuts that should have covered her body were gone, leaving only smooth, unblemished skin. She took a tentative step, then another. Her body responded perfectly, no hesitation, no pain. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had been broken and bloody hours ago, and flexed her fingers in wonder. "This is impossible," she breathed. "Nothing is impossible," Lucian said, echoing his words from the night before. "Only improbable." Sarah moved to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The sight was so beautiful it made her chest ache. When had she last really seen a sunrise? When had she last had time to appreciate beauty instead of just surviving day to day? "What time is it?" she asked. "Nearly 6 in the morning," Lucian replied. "You've been unconscious for about 7 hours. Emma refused to leave your side." Sarah turned to look at her daughter, who'd curled up in the large leather chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Emma, baby, you must be so tired." "I wanted to be there when you woke up," Emma said, through a yawn. "I wanted to make sure you were really okay." More than okay, sweetheart. Thanks to Mr. Thorne." Sarah looked at the vampire, this strange, lonely creature who'd saved them both. "Thank you. I don't know how to properly express what you've done for us, but thank you." Lucian inclined his head slightly. "You sent your daughter to me. You trusted me when you had no reason to. That trust deserves to be honored." "I didn't trust blindly," Sarah admitted. "I've seen you, Mr. Thorne, in town, watching people with such sadness in your eyes. My grandmother used to say you could judge a man's character not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those weaker than himself. I've watched you for 2 years, and I've never seen you harm anyone. Never seen you hunt or feed, or do any of the terrible things the stories claim vampires do." "I feed on animals," Lucian said quietly. "Deer, mostly. Sometimes larger game. I haven't tasted human blood in over 80 years. Not since—" He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Not since what?" Sarah asked gently. Lucian was silent for a long moment, and Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. But then he spoke, his voice heavy with old pain. "Not since I killed my family." The words hung in the air like a curse. Emma gasped softly, but Sarah held up a hand, sensing there was more to this story than the simple, terrible statement suggested. "Will you tell me what happened?" Sarah asked. "You don't have to, but I'd like to understand." Lucian looked at her with ancient, weary eyes. Why would you want to know the sins of a monster?" "Because you're not a monster," Sarah said firmly. "A monster wouldn't have saved me, wouldn't have kept my daughter safe, wouldn't carry such obvious guilt for something that happened decades ago." She paused. "You loved them, your family. I can see it in your eyes." For a long moment, Lucian just stared at her. Then slowly, he sank into a chair by the fireplace. The fire had died during the night, leaving only cold ashes, but he stared at it as if seeing flames from another time. "Her name was Catherine," he began, his voice distant. "My wife. We married in 1610 in a small village in England. I was a physician, not a very good one by modern standards, but I did my best. We had a daughter, Isabella. She was 8 years old, with grey eyes and dark curls, and she loved to sing while she helped her mother in the garden." Sarah sat down across from him, listening intently. Emma had gone quiet, sensing the importance of this moment. "Catherine fell ill," Lucian continued. "Tuberculosis. Though we called it consumption then, I tried everything to save her. Every treatment, every remedy, every prayer. Nothing worked. She was wasting away before my eyes, and I was powerless to stop it." His hands clenched into fists. "One night, a stranger came to my door, pale, beautiful, ageless. He offered me a choice: become like him, gain the power to save my wife, or watch her die. I was desperate, terrified. I accepted. He turned you into a vampire, Sarah said softly. He did, and I learned too late that vampire blood cannot cure human illness. It can only transform, and transformation requires death first. I couldn't save Catherine. I could only watch her die, knowing I'd damned myself for nothing. Lucian's voice cracked slightly, but I still had Isabella, my daughter. I tried to hide what I'd become from her, but children see more than we give them credit for. One night, she saw me feed, saw me drain a deer, saw the blood, saw the monster I'd become. She was terrified. She ran. He closed his eyes. It was winter, deep snow. I searched for her, called for her, but she kept running, kept hiding from the monster who wore her father's face. By the time I found her, it was too late. She'd collapsed in the snow. Hypothermia, she died in my arms, still afraid of me, still trying to get away. Tears, impossible tears, that vampires shouldn't be able to cry, traced down his pale cheeks. I broke my promise to Catherine. I failed to keep our daughter safe, and in my grief, in my rage, I lost control. I fed on humans for the first time, not to survive, but to punish myself, to prove I was the monster Isabella thought I was. How many? Sarah asked quietly. 3. 3 men who'd been cruel to their families, who beat their wives and children. I told myself I was doing justice, but I was just feeding the beast inside me. He looked at Sarah. After the 3rd, I looked at what I'd become and realized Isabella had been right to fear me. So I stopped, swore I would never taste human blood again, and I've kept that promise for 83 years. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Sarah absorbed the story, understanding now the depth of pain this creature carried, the weight of his guilt. You didn't kill your family, she said finally. Circumstances killed them. Illness, fear, winter. You were trying to save them. Intent doesn't absolve action, Lucian replied. If I hadn't become this thing, Catherine might have died, but Isabella would have lived. She would have grown up, married, had children of her own. Instead, she's been dead for nearly 4 centuries, because I was too selfish, too desperate to accept us. You were human, Sarah said firmly, and humans do desperate things when they're losing the people they love. That doesn't make you a monster. That makes you a father and a husband who loved his family more than his own soul. Lucian looked at her with something like wonder. How can you say that? After what I've told you? Because I understand, Sarah said simply. Last night, those men were going to kill me, and all I could think about was Emma. What would happen to her? Who would protect her? Who would love her? She reached out and took Lucian's cold hand in her warm one. If someone had offered me a deal, become a monster, but save your daughter, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. Love makes us do impossible things. Emma, who'd been listening to everything, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Thorne, did Isabella have a favorite song? Lucian blinked, surprised by the question. Yes. She loved a lullaby her mother used to sing, about a bird and a rosebush. Will you teach it to me? Emma asked. That way someone still remembers, someone still sings her song, and maybe wherever she is, she'll hear it and know you're sorry. Know you loved her. Something broke in Lucian's expression. The ancient vampire, who'd held himself together through centuries of loneliness and guilt, crumbled. He covered his face with his hands and wept, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from his very soul. Sarah moved to him, putting her arms around his shoulders. He was cold, so cold, but she held him anyway. Emma climbed onto his lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. It's okay, Emma whispered. It's okay to be sad. Mama says that crying isn't weakness. It's just love with nowhere to go. They stayed like that as dawn broke fully over Thorne Manor. A vampire, a woman changed by his blood, and a brave little girl who'd brought them together. 3 broken souls, beginning to heal in each other's presence. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed, but the journey ahead was just beginning. After Lucian had composed himself, embarrassed by his emotional display, but somehow lighter for it. Sarah asked the practical questions that needed asking. "What happens now?" she said. "We can't go back to that house. Those men might return, and even if they don't," she shuddered, "everything that happened there, I can't take Emma back to that place." "You'll stay here," Lucian said immediately. Then he paused as if surprised by his own certainty. "If you wish to, that is. This house is large, plenty of rooms. You'd be safe, protected." "We can't impose on you like that," Sarah protested, even though every fiber of her being wanted to accept. The thought of going back out into the world, vulnerable and exposed, terrified her. "It's not an imposition," Lucian said. "This house has been empty for too long, silent for too long." And he looked at Emma, then at Sarah. "I made you a promise, that Emma would be safe. I intend to keep it." "Can we, Mama?" Emma asked, hopefully. "Can we stay? This place is like a castle, and Miss Thorne has so many books. And Emma, sweetheart, this is Mr. Thorne's home. We can't just—" "Please," Lucian interrupted quietly. "Let me do this. Let me keep my promise. Let me—" he struggled for words. "Let me have a family again. Even if it's not in the traditional sense. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, purpose. Let me repay that gift." Sarah looked at this ancient creature, this vampire who cried for a daughter, dead 400 years, who'd saved her life at great personal cost, who looked at Emma with such gentle wonder. "Okay," she said softly, "we'll stay, at least until we figure out what comes next." Emma cheered, jumping up and down with excitement. "Can I explore? Can I see the whole house?" Lucian actually smiled, a real genuine smile that transformed his face from severe to almost boyish. "You may explore any room except the ones in the East Wing. Those are dangerous, old, unstable, but the rest of the house is yours to discover." As Emma raced off to explore her new temporary home, Sarah stayed behind with Lucian. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything, for saving my life, for protecting Emma, for sharing your story with me." "Thank you for listening," Lucian replied, "for not running in terror, for—" he hesitated, "for seeing me as something more than a monster." "You are so much more than that," Sarah said firmly. She stood up, stretching, marveling again at the feeling of a body that was whole and strong. "Now, I don't know about you, but I'm starving. When was the last time you had a proper meal in this house?" Lucian looked confused. "I don't eat food. Not anymore." "Well, Emma and I do, and if we're going to stay here, we need to establish some normalcy." Sarah headed toward where she assumed the kitchen might be. "Come on, show me your kitchen, and let's see what we're working with." The kitchen, when they found it, was like stepping back in time. A massive cast-iron stove, copper pots hanging from ceiling hooks, an icebox instead of a refrigerator. Everything was clean but clearly unused, frozen in time from decades ago. "When was the last time anyone cooked in here?" Sarah asked. 1942. Lucian admitted. "I had a housekeeper until then, Mrs. Brennan. She was kind, never asked questions. But after she passed away, I saw no reason to hire anyone else." "Well, that's going to change," Sarah said decisively. "We'll need supplies, food, fresh clothes for Emma and me, basic necessities." She paused. "And I'll need to figure out what to do about money. Everything we had was in that house, and I'm not going back there." "Money isn't a concern," Lucian said. "I've had 4 centuries to accumulate wealth. What's mine is yours. Consider it payment for bringing life back to this house." Sarah wanted to argue, to insist they'd find their own way, but she was also practical. They had nothing. No clothes, but what they wore. No money, no resources, and Emma needed stability, needed safety. "Okay," she agreed, "but this isn't charity. I'll earn my keep. I can cook, clean, manage the household. Emma can help too. We'll be useful, not just refugees." "You're not refugees," Lucian said softly. "You're family." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Family, something both of them had lost, and thought they'd never have again. Before Sarah could respond, Emma's voice echoed through the house. "Mama, Mr. Thorne, come quick. I found something." They found Emma in what appeared to be a music room, dust-covered and long forgotten. In the center was a grand piano, its black surface dulled by decades of neglect. But Emma had found something else, a portrait hanging on the wall. It showed a young girl with dark curls and grey eyes, wearing a blue dress, holding a single rose. Her smile was bright and innocent, captured in oil and canvas. "Is this Isabella?" Emma asked quietly. Lucian stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the portrait he'd covered over 80 years ago, unable to bear looking at it. "Yes," he whispered, "that's my daughter." Emma studied the portrait with the seriousness of a child who understood loss. "She was beautiful, and she looks kind." "She was," Lucian said, his voice thick, "so very kind." "I'm sorry you lost her," Emma said, "but I'm glad we found you, because you shouldn't be alone anymore." "Nobody should be alone." She took Lucian's hand in one of hers, and Sarah's in the other, linking them together. "We're family now," Emma declared with the absolute certainty of a 10-year-old. "All three of us. And family takes care of each other." Sarah looked at Lucian over Emma's head, and saw her own thoughts reflected in his ancient eyes. This strange, impossible family, born of desperation and violence and supernatural intervention, shouldn't work. By all logic it should fall apart. But somehow, standing there in that forgotten music room, linked by a brave little girl who'd run through a storm to find a monster and found a protector instead, it felt right. It felt like home. The first week at Thorne Manor passed in a strange, dreamlike haze. Sarah found herself adapting to her new reality with surprising ease. The enhanced senses that had been overwhelming at first became manageable, then natural. She learned to filter the constant influx of information, to focus on Emma's voice in a crowded room, to smell the subtle difference between fresh bread and day-old bread, to hear the approach of visitors long before they reached the door. Not that they had many visitors. Thorne Manor remained isolated, avoided by the townspeople who still whispered their superstitious stories. But inside those walls, something remarkable was happening. Life was returning to the old house. Sarah had taken charge of the domestic sphere with the efficiency of someone who'd been managing a household on nothing for too long. Lucian had given her access to his accounts, wealth accumulated over centuries through careful investments and compound interest, and she'd been practical about it. Food, clothes, basic supplies. Nothing extravagant, despite his insistence that money was no object. "We don't need luxury," she'd told him firmly. "We need stability." The kitchen, dormant since 1942, came alive again. Sarah cooked simple meals, soups and stews and fresh bread, and though Lucian couldn't eat them, he sat with them anyway. He'd forgotten how much he missed the simple ritual of family meals, the warmth of conversation over food, the sound of laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for so long. Emma thrived in ways that broke Sarah's heart and healed it simultaneously. The fear that had haunted her daughter's eyes since Tom's death began to fade, replaced by curiosity and joy. She explored every inch of the manor that Lucian deemed safe, discovering treasures in forgotten rooms, old books, strange artifacts, a music box that played a melody from centuries past. And she asked questions, endless questions. "Mr. Thorne, how old were you when you became a vampire?" 32, Lucian answered, patient with her curiosity in a way that surprised even himself. "I've been 32 for 413 years. Do you miss being able to eat food?" "Sometimes. I miss the ritual of it more than the taste, the way meals brought people together. Can you go out in the sun?" "I can, but it's uncomfortable, like standing too close to a fire. It won't kill me, that's a myth, but it drains my strength and makes me vulnerable." "Do you sleep in a coffin, Emma?" Sarah had interjected, embarrassed, but Lucian had laughed, actually laughed, a sound rusty from disuse, but genuine. "No coffin," he'd assured Emma, "just a normal bed, though I don't sleep much. A few hours every few days is all I need." "What do you do all night then?" "I read, think, remember, listen to the world outside." He'd paused. "It gets lonely sometimes." Emma had considered this seriously, then declared, "Well, you're not lonely anymore. You have us. And somehow, impossibly, that simple statement was true. It was on the 8th night that everything changed. Sarah woke suddenly, her enhanced senses screaming danger before her conscious mind could process why. She sat up in the large bedroom Lucian had given her, once a guest room, now furnished with basics but comfortable, and listened. There, at the edge of the property, multiple heartbeats, voices low and angry. The men from that night had returned. Sarah was out of bed and moving before thought caught up with action. Her new strength and speed carried her down the hallway to Emma's room. Her daughter slept peacefully, curled up with a stuffed rabbit Lucian had found in the attic, one that had belonged to Isabella, though he'd been too emotional to say it aloud. "Emma," Sarah whispered urgently, shaking her daughter awake. "Emma, wake up. We need to go to Mr. Thorne. Now." Emma blinked sleepily. "Mama, what's wrong? Just trust me, baby." Quickly. They found Lucian already in the study, standing by the window, his body tense. He turned when they entered, and Sarah saw something frightening in his eyes. Not anger, but cold, calculated danger. "You heard them," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. How many?" "5. 3 from before, and 2 others. They're armed." Lucian's jaw clenched. "They've been drinking, building up courage. They want revenge for the humiliation, for the fear. And they've convinced themselves that you have money hidden here." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, pulling Emma close. "You stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Lucian moved toward the door, but Sarah caught his arm. "Wait. You can't just. What are you going to do?" Lucian looked at her, and in that moment she saw the predator behind the gentle facade. The ancient creature who'd survived 4 centuries of dangers she couldn't imagine. "I'm going to remind them why people fear the dark," he said quietly. "Don't kill them," Sarah said urgently. "Please, I know they deserve it. But if they die here, there will be questions, investigations. We can't have that kind of attention." Lucian paused, considering. "You're right, but they need to be dealt with permanently. They won't stop coming back." "Then scare them," Sarah suggested. "Scare them so badly they never want to think about this place again." A slow, dark smile crossed Lucian's face. "That I can do." He left, moving like a shadow, and Sarah locked the door behind him. She held Emma close, listening with her enhanced hearing as Lucian descended the stairs, as the front door opened and closed with a whisper of sound. "Mama, what's happening?" Emma asked, frightened now. "Those bad men came back," Sarah said honestly. She'd learned that lying to Emma only made things worse. "But Mr. Thorne is going to send them away. He's going to keep us safe." "Will he hurt them?" "Only if he has to." They waited, listening. Sarah could hear the men now, their voices carrying in the night air. "Told you, man, the freak's got money. Old house like this, full of antiques and shit. You sure he's even home? Place looks dead. Where else would a vampire go?" Laughter, harsh and cruel. Then silence. Then screaming. Lucian hadn't bothered with the front gate. He'd simply appeared in front of the 5 men, materializing from shadows like a nightmare given form. The first man, one of the original 3, dropped his crowbar with a clatter. "Jesus Christ, how did you leave?" Lucian said simply. "Now, while you still can." The new men, both large, both armed with guns, tried to look brave. The taller one raised his weapon. "We're not scared of you, freak. You might have some tricks, but bullets work just fine." "Do they?" Lucian tilted his head. "Shall we test that theory?" The man fired 3 shots, sent a mass. Lucian stood perfectly still and let them hit. Let the men see the holes appear in his chest. Let them see the blood, dark and old, well up and then stop. Let them see the holes close. "My turn," Lucian said. He moved. To the men he was a blur. One moment standing 20 feet away, the next moment among them. His hand closed around the shooter's wrist and squeezed. Bones cracked. The gun fell. Lucian picked up the second man and threw him into a tree trunk, hard enough to knock him unconscious. The third man tried to run, but Lucian was faster. appearing in his path, eyes blazing crimson in the darkness. "I told you what would happen if you came back," Lucian said softly. "I told you I would show you horrors." He let his true nature show, let his fangs extend fully, sharp and gleaming. Let the predatory instinct that he'd suppressed for decades rise to the surface. He grabbed the running man by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Look at me," Lucian commanded. "Look into my eyes and see what I am." The man looked, and what he saw in those ancient crimson eyes broke something inside him. He saw death. He saw centuries of darkness. He saw a creature that had walked through wars and plagues and the fall of empires and emerged unchanged, unchanging, unstoppable. He saw a vampire. Lucian dropped him, and the man scrambled away, whimpering. "All of you listen," Lucian said, his voice carrying supernatural weight. "This is my final warning. You will leave. You will never return. You will never speak of this place or the people who live here. And if I ever hear that you've hurt another innocent person, I will find you. Distance means nothing to me. Time means nothing to me. I have eternity to hunt you, and I will make your last moments on earth a symphony of suffering." He smiled, showing every fang. "Do we understand each other?" They understood. They ran, dragging their unconscious companion, leaving behind weapons and courage and any thought of revenge. Lucian listened to them flee, to their car start up, to the sound of the engine fading into the distance. He stood alone in the darkness, letting his fangs retract, letting the predator recede. He'd kept his promise to Sarah. He hadn't killed them, but he'd made sure they'd never forget what they'd seen. When he returned to the manor, Sarah and Emma were waiting in the study. Sarah searched his face anxiously. "Are they gone?" "They won't be back," Lucian assured her. "I made certain of it." "Did you?" "No, they're alive." Terrified, but alive. He sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. Using his powers so extensively had drained him. "But Sarah, this is my world. Violence, fear, danger. Are you certain you want Emma growing up in it?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to stand in front of him, Emma at her side. "Mr. Thorne, Lucian," she corrected, using his first name for the first time. "In my world, my husband gambled away everything we had and left us in debt to criminals. In my world, I worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep us safe. In my world, I got beaten, nearly to death, while my daughter watched." She reached out and took his cold hand in her warm one. "Your world has danger, yes, but it also has you, and I'd rather face danger with you than safety without you." Emma nodded vigorously. "Besides, this is our home now. We're a family. Families stick together." Lucian looked at these 2 extraordinary humans who'd somehow found their way into his dead heart and brought it back to life. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Maybe not," Sarah said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with us anyway." The days that followed were different. The last threat had been dealt with, and a strange peace settled over Thorne Manor. Not the silence of isolation, but the comfortable quiet of home. Sarah took over managing the estate, her enhanced abilities making tasks easier. She could carry loads that should have been impossible, could work for hours without tiring, could sense when something needed attention before it became a problem. Emma started homeschooling. Lucian, it turned out, was an extraordinary teacher. 4 centuries of accumulated knowledge meant he could teach her history from personal experience, literature in the original languages, science with an understanding of how theories had evolved over time. The French Revolution, he held her one afternoon in the library, wasn't quite how the history books describe it. "I was in Paris in 1789. The streets ran red with blood. Yes, but there was also hope, terrible, desperate hope, that things could change." Emma listened, enthralled, while Sarah worked nearby, occasionally interjecting with questions of her own. They fell into routine. Sarah cooked dinner each evening, and though Lucian couldn't eat, he sat with them, telling stories of centuries past or listening to Emma's excited chatter about what she'd learned that day. After dinner, they'd move to the music room, cleaned and restored now, and Emma would practice piano while Lucian gave her lessons with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Sometimes, on those evenings, he'd teach Emma the old songs, the lullabies from his human life, and when Emma sang them in her clear, pure voice, Lucian would close his eyes and remember Catherine singing to Isabella, and the pain was still there, but it was gentler now, healing. One night, 3 weeks after they'd arrived, Sarah found Lucian in the portrait room, staring at Isabella's painting. "You come here often," she observed softly. "I spent 80 years unable to look at this portrait," Lucian admitted. The pain was too great, but now, he smiled slightly, now I can look at her, and remember the joy, not just the loss. Emma did that. You both did that. She would have been proud of you, Sarah said. Isabella, if she could see you now, helping us, protecting Emma, choosing to be kind even when it would be easier to be cruel, she would have been so proud. How can you possibly know that? Because I'm a mother, Sarah said simply. And if Emma ever doubted me, ever feared me, the only thing I'd want would be for her to see that I was trying, that I loved her, that I'd do anything to be better for her. She moved to stand beside him. You spent centuries trying to be better, Lucian. That matters. Lucian turned to look at her, really look at her. Sarah Carter, who'd come to him broken and dying, who'd somehow become the center of this strange new family. She was beautiful, he realized, not just physically, though she was that, but beautiful in her strength, her compassion, her absolute refusal to give up. Sarah, he said softly, I need to tell you something. What is it? The blood bond. When I gave you my blood, it didn't just heal you, it created a connection between us. You can sense me, feel when I'm near, know when I'm in danger. And he hesitated, I can feel you too. Your emotions, your pain, your joy. We're linked in a way that's difficult to explain. Sarah processed this. Is that a problem? I don't know, Lucian admitted. Blood bonds are complex. They can be intense. I wanted you to understand what had happened, what I'd unknowingly done to you. Can it be broken? With time and distance it would fade. If you left, stopped being near me, the connection would weaken. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Lucian's ancient heart, which barely beat, clenched with fear. Had he driven her away? Had the truth been too much? Then Sarah laughed, actually laughed. Lucian Thorne, she said, shaking her head. Are you trying to scare me off? Because I've already told you, we're not leaving. Blood bond or no blood bond, this is our home. You're our family, but you should have a choice. I do have a choice, and I choose to stay. She reached up and gently touched his face, her warm hand against his cold cheek. Besides, the bond goes both ways, right? You're stuck feeling my emotions too, all my worry and fear, and she paused, and affection. Lucian stilled. Affection. Sarah blushed slightly, but didn't back down. Yes, affection. You've saved my life, protected my daughter, given us a home when we had nothing. You've been kind and gentle and patient. How could I not feel affection for you? I'm a monster, Lucian whispered. You're a man, Sarah corrected firmly. A man who's been hurt, who's made mistakes, who's trying to be better. The vampire part is just biology. It doesn't define you. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, her lips warm against his cold skin. Thank you, Lucian, for everything. Then she left, heading back to check on Emma, leaving Lucian standing alone in the portrait room, touching the spot where her lips had been, feeling something he hadn't felt in. When the priest asked if anyone objected, Emma had grinned and said, I suggested it, so I'd better not object now. They exchanged rings, simple bands that Lucian had commissioned from a jeweler 3 towns over, where no one knew their story. And when the priest pronounced them husband and wife, when Lucian kissed his bride, Emma had clapped so enthusiastically that the sound echoed through the manor like celebration given form. After the priest left, generously paid for his discretion, the 3 of them sat down to a meal. Sarah had prepared roast chicken and vegetables and fresh bread. Lucian couldn't eat it, But he sat with them anyway, as he had for 5 years, watching his family with contentment so profound it ached. To family, Emma toasted with her glass of cider. The family we're born to, and the family we choose. To family, Sarah and Lucian echoed. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah and Lucian sat together in his study, their study now, and talked about the future. I want to give you something, Lucian said, something I should have offered years ago. Lucian, you've given me everything, not this. He took her hand. Sarah, you're aging slowly because of the blood bond, but you're still aging, still mortal. I can change that if you want. I can make you truly immortal. Sarah stilled. You mean turn me into a vampire? Yes. It's not a decision to be made lightly. You would die and be reborn. You'd need blood to survive. You'd outlive everyone you know, including Emma, eventually. But you'd also be with me. For centuries. For as long as this world turns. Sarah was quiet for a long time, thinking. Emma, she finally said. What about Emma? That's her choice to make when she's older, Lucian said. If she wants transformation, I'll offer it. If she wants to live a normal human life, grow old naturally, I'll respect that. But Sarah, you have to decide for yourself. Not for Emma. Not for me. What do you want? Sarah looked at this man, this vampire, this ancient creature who'd learned to love again because a frightened little girl had knocked on his door. She thought about centuries with him, about watching Emma live and love and eventually die, about becoming something not quite human. Can I think about it? She asked. You can take as long as you need, Lucian assured her. The offer stands for as long as you live, whether that's 50 years or 500. Sarah nodded, relieved. Then she smiled. Right now, I just want to be with you, human. Vampire, whatever comes. I just want to be your wife. Lucian pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night. 10 more years passed. Emma went to college, a prestigious university 3 states away. She studied medicine, fascinated by biology and healing, wanting to understand the science behind what Lucian was, what her mother had become. She called home every week, sometimes twice a week. She told them about her classes, her friends, the boy she was dating, a kind pre-med student named Daniel who made her laugh. She came home for holidays and summers, and each time Lucian marveled at how much she'd grown, how much she'd become her own person. Sarah didn't age during those 10 years, not visibly. The blood bond, maintained through Lucian's love and presence, had halted her aging almost completely. She looked exactly as she had the night of their wedding, eternally young, eternally beautiful. They were happy, deeply, profoundly happy, in a way neither had imagined possible. But Sarah had still not decided about transformation. The crisis came suddenly, as crises often do. Emma was 25 now, graduated from medical school, engaged to Daniel. She'd come home to plan the wedding, bringing her fiancé to finally meet her unusual family. Daniel was everything Emma had described, kind, intelligent, accepting. When Emma explained about Lucian, about what he was, Daniel had taken it surprisingly well. I've seen enough impossible things in medicine, he'd said. Why not vampires too? The wedding was planned for June at the manor, with Emma insisting that Lucian walk her down the aisle. You're my father in every way that matters, she'd told him. I want you to give me away. Lucian had been unable to speak for a full minute, too overwhelmed with emotion. But 3 weeks before the wedding, Emma collapsed. Sarah was in the garden when she felt it, a sudden sharp pain through the blood bond that wasn't hers. She ran inside to find Daniel carrying Emma. Emma's face pale and twisted in agony. She just dropped. Daniel said, his medical training battling with his fear. She was fine, and then she grabbed her head and put her on the sofa. Sarah commanded, her own medical knowledge, learned from 15 years of living with a vampire who'd once been a physician, taking over. Emma, sweetheart, can you hear me? Emma's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. Mama, it hurts, my head. Lucian appeared, moving with supernatural speed. He took one look at Emma and his face went grey. Brain aneurysm. I can hear the bleeding. What? Daniel's face went white. No, that's impossible. She has no family history of... We need to get her to a hospital, Sarah said urgently. Now, there's no time, Lucian said flatly. She'll be dead before we get halfway there. The bleeding is too severe. Then stop it. Sarah grabbed his arm. Use your blood. Heal her like you healed me. Lucian's face was anguished. Sarah, she's not injured the way you were. This is internal, catastrophic. My blood might not work, and if it doesn't, she dies anyway, Sarah said fiercely. Please, Lucian, she's our daughter. Please save her. Emma cried out, a sound of pure agony, and blood began trickling from her nose. Daniel was frantically calling 911, but they all knew the truth. Help wouldn't come in time. Lucian looked at Emma, at this brave girl who'd run through a storm 15 years ago to save her mother, who'd brought light back into his endless darkness, who'd taught him that love was worth the risk of loss. He couldn't lose her. Not like this. Not like Isabella. Emma, he said urgently, kneeling beside her. Emma, listen to me. I can save you, but you have to choose. My blood might heal you, or it might transform you. Do you understand? Emma's eyes, clouded with pain, found his. Do it, she whispered. I trust you. Lucian bit into his wrist and pressed it to Emma's lips. Drink, daughter. Live. Emma drank weakly at first, then stronger as the blood took effect. Sarah held her hand, praying to gods she wasn't sure existed, begging the universe to spare her daughter. Daniel watched, horrified and fascinated, his medical understanding warring with the supernatural reality before him. For long minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then Emma's body convulsed, her back arching off the sofa. The blood from her nose, her breathing, which had been shallow and labored, deepened. It's working, Lucian breathed. The blood is repairing the damage. They waited, Sarah and Lucian holding Emma between them, while Daniel stood by helplessly. The ambulance arrived. Daniel had forgotten to cancel the call, but Lucian sent them away with a substantial payment and a compulsion to forget they'd ever been here. By dawn, Emma was stable. The bleeding had stopped. The aneurysm had healed. She slept peacefully, her breathing normal, her color returning, but they all knew the truth. Emma had been too close to death. The blood had done more than heal her. It had begun to transform her. Emma woke 3 days later. She opened her eyes to find her parents, because that's what they were, both of them, sitting vigil beside her bed. Daniel was there too, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Hey, Emma said softly. Her voice sounded different, clearer, stronger. Emma, Sarah grabbed her hand. How do you feel? Different, Emma admitted. She looked at Lucian. I'm changing, aren't I? Into what you are. Lucian nodded slowly. The transformation has begun. I'm sorry. I tried to just heal you, but you were so close to death that... Don't apologize, Emma interrupted. You saved my life. Again. She smiled weakly. Seems to be a habit with you. I should have been more careful. Should have used less blood. Should have. Lucian. Emma reached for his hand with her free one. You did exactly what you should have done. You saved me. And yeah, I'm becoming a vampire. That's going to take some getting used to. But I'm alive. I get to have a future. She looked at Daniel. We get to have a future, if you still want me. Daniel moved to her side immediately. Are you kidding? Emma, you almost died. I thought I was going to lose you. Vampire, human, whatever you're becoming, I don't care. I love you. Even if I'll live for centuries and you'll grow old. Daniel's face fell as the reality hit him. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I can transform you too, Lucian said quietly. When you're ready. If you're ready, I won't force it on anyone, but the option exists. You could both have eternity. Daniel looked overwhelmed. Can we think about it? This is a lot to process. Of course, Lucian said. There's no rush. Take whatever time you need. The wedding was postponed, but only by a few weeks, just long enough for Emma to adjust to her changing nature. She was in the transitional phase, no longer fully human, not yet fully vampire. She was stronger, faster, her senses enhanced. She needed blood now, though not much. Lucian taught her to feed on animals, to control the urge, to be what he was, a predator who chose compassion. Daniel struggled with the decision. Emma told him she'd understand if he walked away, if this was too much. But he stayed, wrestling with the choice of transformation or growing old while Emma remained young. In the end, it was Emma who made it easy for him. I don't want you to transform for me, she said. I want you to choose what you want. If you want a normal life, a normal death, I'll love you for as long as you live. And when you're gone, I'll remember you forever. But you'll be alone, Daniel protested. I'll have my family, Emma said, looking at Sarah and Lucian. I'll never be alone. Daniel thought for a long time, and then, 3 months later, he asked Lucian for transformation. Not because I'm afraid of death, he explained, but because I want centuries with Emma. I want to see the world change. I want to keep learning, keep growing, keep loving with her forever. Lucian performed the ritual with Sarah and Emma present. It was painful. Transformation always was. But when Daniel woke 3 days later, reborn as a vampire, Emma was there, and the look of joy on both their faces made the pain worth it. They were married in the autumn. As the leaves turned gold and red around Thorne Manor, Emma wore white, looking radiant despite her pale skin and new nature. Daniel stood beside her, tall and proud, his eyes crimson but filled with love. Lucian walked Emma down the aisle, and when the officiant asked who gave this woman, Lucian's voice was strong and clear. Her mother and I did. Sarah cried through the entire ceremony, tears of joy for her daughter's happiness, and tears of gratitude for the strange, wonderful life they'd built together. At the reception held in the manor's ballroom, cleaned and restored, Emma found Sarah alone for a moment. Thank you, Mama, Emma said softly. For what, sweetheart? For being brave enough to run into the storm that night, for trusting a stranger, for building this family. Emma hugged her mother tight. I have everything, because you were brave. Sarah held her daughter close. No, baby, I have everything, because you were brave. You're the one who knocked on a vampire's door and changed all our lives. They stood together, mother and daughter, both changed by vampire blood, both stronger than they'd ever imagined possible. Are you going to transform? Emma asked softly. Become fully vampire like me and Daniel. Sarah looked across the room to where Lucian stood, talking with Daniel, a real smile on his face. I think so, she said. I've been afraid for so long, but watching you, seeing how happy you are, I think I'm ready. I think I want eternity with him. He'll be so happy, Emma said. What about you? Sarah asked. Are you happy, truly? Emma looked at Daniel, at Lucian, at the manor that had become her home. She thought about the frightened 10-year-old who'd run through the rain, desperate and alone, and she thought about who she'd become, strong, loved, eternal. I'm more than happy, Mama, she said. I'm home. Sarah asked Lucian for transformation on their 20th wedding anniversary. They were in the music room, their favorite place, where so many important moments had happened. Emma and Daniel were there too, family witnessing family. I'm ready, Sarah said. I've had 20 years to think about it, and I'm ready. I want to be with you, Lucian, forever. Lucian's hands trembled as he took hers. Are you certain? Once it's done, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything, Sarah said firmly, except maybe running into the storm to find you. The transformation took 3 days, and they were the longest 3 days of Lucian's existence. He sat vigil by Sarah's side as her body died and was reborn, as the change took hold, as she became something more than human. When Sarah finally woke, her eyes were crimson, her skin pale as moonlight. She was beautiful. She'd always been beautiful. But now she was timeless, eternal. "Hello, husband," she said with a smile that showed new fangs. "Hello, wife," Lucian whispered, and kissed her. Years passed, decades. The world changed around them, but Thorne Manor remained, a constant in an ever-shifting landscape. Emma and Daniel built lives as doctors, using their eternal existence to help people, to research, to heal. They traveled the world, but always came home to the manor, to family. Sarah and Lucian grew deeper in love with each passing year. They renewed their vows every decade, a tradition that Emma delighted in organizing. They faced the centuries together, facing loss and joy and everything in between. But they were never alone. They had each other. They had family. It was a quiet evening in late autumn, 200 years after Emma had first knocked on Thorne Manor's door. The manor had been modernized over the years, carefully, subtly, maintaining its historical character, while embracing necessary change. But the music room remained exactly as it had always been, with Isabella's portrait still hanging on the wall. Lucian sat at the piano, his fingers moving across the keys, playing the lullaby Catherine had once sung to Isabella. He played it often now, not with pain but with love, with remembrance. Sarah sat nearby, reading a book that had been published just last week. She looked exactly as she had on their wedding day, eternally beautiful, eternally his. Emma and Daniel were visiting, as they did several times a year. They'd brought their adopted daughter, a 5-year-old girl named Catherine, who they'd rescued from a dangerous situation, much like Sarah and Emma had once faced. The little girl was human still, too young to understand what her family was, but loved beyond measure. Little Catherine was playing on the floor, building elaborate structures with blocks. She looked up at the portrait on the wall and asked, "Who's that lady?" Lucian smiled. "That's Isabella. She was my daughter, a very long time ago." "She's pretty," Catherine said. "Does she live here?" "Not anymore," Lucian said gently. "But she's always with me in my heart. Just like you'll always be in your parents' hearts, no matter where life takes you." Catherine considered this seriously, then went back to her blocks. Emma came to sit at this seriously, then went back to her blocks. Emma came to sit beside Lucian on the piano bench. "Play another one. The song you taught me when I first came here." Lucian nodded and began to play, and Emma sang in a voice that had matured over 2 centuries, but still held that same pure quality. Sarah joined in, and then Daniel, and finally little Catherine, who didn't know the words but hummed along anyway. And Lucian looked around at his family, his beautiful, impossible, eternal family, and felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace. Complete and absolute peace. He thought of that night, 200 years ago, when a frightened little girl had knocked on his door and said the words that changed everything. "They beat my mama, she's dying." He'd been stunned that night, frozen by the echo of his own loss, his own pain. But that little girl had saved him, not just her mother, him. She'd reached into the darkness where he'd hidden for so long and pulled him back into the light. She'd given him a family. She'd given him a reason to live. She'd given him everything. The song ended, and in the comfortable silence that followed, Emma leaned her head on Lucian's shoulder. "I love you, Dad," she said softly. She'd started calling him that decades ago, and it still made his ancient heart swell. "I love you too, daughter," Lucian replied, "more than you'll ever know." "Oh, I know," Emma said with a smile. "Trust me, I know." Little Catherine climbed into Sarah's lap, and Sarah wrapped her arms around the child, meeting Lucian's eyes over her head. In that look past everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, everything they'd built together. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent. Inside Thorne Manor, in the music room where so many memories lived, a family sat together in love and peace. And Lucian Thorne, who'd walked through 4 centuries of darkness, finally understood what it meant to be home. The promise he'd made to Sarah that desperate night, to protect Emma, to keep her safe, had been kept 1,000 times over. But more than that, Sarah and Emma had kept their promise to him. They'd saved him. They'd loved him. They'd made him human again, in all the ways that mattered. And that love, that fierce, impossible, eternal love, was worth everything. Worth the pain. Worth the risk. Worth living for forever.